One of the many things I adore about Studio Ghibli films is that they never tell you exactly what to think. These movies, in 1,000 different ways, present stories that can at times feel mundane or ordinary, and earnestly say that the emotions present in those everyday moments are just as powerful and real as the ones that tear you to pieces. Such is the case in Isao Takahata's 1991 slice of life, Only Yesterday, in which 27-year-old Taiko Okajima takes a summer vacation to the countryside away from her office job in Tokyo. The trip brings out Taiko's memories of her 10-year-old self, and she reminisces on several of the key scenes in her childhood that she is only now realizing had a profound and deep-rooted effect on her life as an adult. Over the course of Only Yesterday, we see through gorgeously styled impressionist flashbacks, Taiko as a child repeatedly denied formative experiences for the sake of others. As the youngest child in her family by far, she receives lots of hand-me-downs and rarely has anything to call her own. Her genuine passion for theater and performance are shot down by a disinterested father, her struggles in math class are met with no support and even hostility from her mother and older sister, and her family never even acknowledging the changes teenage girls undergo during puberty leaves her feeling self-conscious and isolated from her peers even more than she already is. By contrast, Taiko seems to genuinely enjoy her time in the country as an adult in the present-day scenes of Only Yesterday. She arrives on the farm her sister's in-laws run already dressed for work and vigorously and joyously exhausts herself with the never-ending stream of chores that farm life brings. She imagines what life was like for farm workers before modern technology and goes through the steps of the saffron harvest with whimsy and delight along the way. Her brother-in-law's second cousin Toshio quickly becomes a confidant for her onslaught of memories, and she finds herself able to talk to him effortlessly. The two bond over their differences and similarities through incredibly endearing and realistic dialogue as the harvest continues, and on the farm, Taiko seems happy. Taiko's childhood, as we discover in Only Yesterday, was an extremely difficult one, just not in the sense that most people think of when they hear those words. Her physical and educational needs were met more or less, but the emotional and social exploration children need to be emotionally mature adults was almost completely absent. Even though those experiences she was denied probably wouldn't have amounted to anything substantial, and she even says so herself, Taiko still did not have those transformative experiences in the first place and never underwent the self-questioning necessary for adequate emotional development through them. In many ways, her time in the country is Taiko giving herself the experiences she was denied as a child and experiencing the play, exploration, and discovery an emotionally healthy childhood is supposed to have. Being out on the farm and doing things she likes in an area she likes as opposed to the successful and prescriptive life she has in the city is her own way of having these self-discovery experiences for the first time. Taiko is enjoying all of these things because they are so different from the life she is used to, but more than that, this vacation is something that she chose for herself. And very importantly, in contrast, the film doesn't look back at her childhood vignettes with resentment. Daisy Ridley's incredible performance in the English dub shows a real love for the memories Taiko has, complemented beautifully by the realist animation style of the present-day scenes. It's almost as if Taiko has been at peace with these scenes for her whole life, but is only now realizing how much her and others' focus on getting it right in all things in life kept her from things she didn't even know she was missing. As an example, Taiko wants to do right by her parents that did everything they could to raise her well and tries to be successful in the ways she is allowed. It's alluded to, but I think that her restrictive father likely had a very similar experience in his childhood as well. In many cases, people get into these generational ruts of complacency out of a genuine and well-meaning interest to do well by the people in their life, to see their wishes fulfilled because we love them and care about them, often at our own expense. And that's not to say that choosing oneself over the wishes of others is selfish or depriving your loved ones of that care and attention, but rather that the cycle of complacency will be passed on to the next generation out of nothing but good intentions. Or to be an absolute lib, and quote Karl Marx, the tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. But Taiko was far from a Marxist on her self-discovery journey, and her father's childhood, while important, is ultimately not the focus of this story. Nearly all of the men in this story are nothing but accessories to the plot except for one. Toshio. Toshio, once again, is Taiko's brother-in-law's second cousin. You got all that? And in the ways many people in Taiko's circle would define it, not successful. He's been a farmer all his life, and while acknowledging the intensity of the labor involved, has a reverence and heartfelt passion for his trade. Toshio talks at length multiple times about the complications of organic farming in the late 20th century, and his endearing dialogue is so adorably well written and realistic that it's difficult not to love this guy. He seems genuinely happy down to his soul in ways Taiko isn't, but also feels like he's missing something deep down as well. Nevertheless, he is living a life that he loves, doing something that he loves, and in so many words, is what Taiko is subconsciously searching for in herself. Through recounting these memories to him over the course of the film, Taiko finds that she can talk to Toshio effortlessly despite hardly knowing him. They seem to be kindred spirits as they bond over similarities in their childhoods and differences in their adulthoods. Taiko's love for the country is countered by Toshio's knowledge of how much work went into the scenery she admires. Toshio is all ears as Taiko recounts her memories and sincerely seems invested in helping her understand herself. The only thing that gets between the two of them bonding is when the granny at the farmhouse suggests that they get married, so Taiko can stay on the farm since she's obviously happy here and obviously enjoys Toshio's company. It's Toshio that drives her back home after she runs off in the rain, though not in a romantic way in the slightest. He just really wants to know what's going on and what Taiko was feeling. The film ends the next day. Taiko, at the end of her vacation, leaves to go back to Tokyo as visages of her child self and classmates appear around her. In a dreamlike moment of revelation, she gets off the train and heads back to the farm and is met by Toshio to take her back. I would say roll credits, but this is actually the most important scene in the whole movie. This ending doesn't seem like any triumphant declaration that Taiko is changing her life for the better, but like the rest of the movie, understands that sometimes the most ordinary moments are the ones worth remembering the most. It took me a while of thinking about the ending of this movie to really wrap my head around it. I refuse to believe that after all of the maturity and subtlety that Takahata masterfully demonstrates over the course of the whole film, that he would, stop me if you've heard this one before, succumb to cishet brain rot at the end of the movie and romantically pair the female lead with the male lead for a they get married happily ever after that comes out of nowhere. Instead, I choose to believe that the film's ending is Taiko finally growing up for the first time. Finally choosing something for herself for the first time, knowing that while life on the farm may not work out in the long term, right now it's what she needs the most. Right now, she cannot go back to her preordained office job in the city, nor can she leave Toshio and his genuine interest in understanding her past. The two aren't a romantic pair, they're simply two people that met at the right time and need each other's understanding to better understand themselves. Taiko needs Toshio to help her continue to understand herself, whatever that may mean. Toshio needs Taiko to confirm to himself that the grass actually wouldn't necessarily be greener on the other side. And if they end up together romantically at some point in the future, that's fine. But if you watch this entire movie and see everything the two of them go through together, honestly ask yourself, do you think this is more than anything a story about two soulmates? I think not. Only Yesterday does not demand from its viewers a carpe diem moment where everything is dropped to chase a dream, but instead asks its viewers if they think they know who they are enough to know that they wouldn't be happy with something else. Taiko says she remembers these scenes from her childhood like they were only yesterday because in relation to her own emotional development, they might as well be only yesterday. Taiko knows very little more about herself at 27 years old than she did at 10. But the movie very deliberately shows that Taiko is not bitter about these memories. She's accepted them for what they are and how they've shaped the woman she is in the present. Only Yesterday's statement about growing up is that it is a process that can go on for one's entire life, and that one's own understanding of their purpose in life depends on how closely they have been allowed to follow their heart, wherever it leads. Taiko probably wouldn't have been a big name in showbiz, or loved having stylish new clothes and accessories as a kid, or being emotionally mature enough to have a teenage relationship with another boy her age, but she doesn't know for sure. She is, however, aware in the present day that all of these things and more still make up who she is, and is even more acutely aware of the difference between that and who she realizes she wants to be. It took me a while to wrap my head around this ending, even more than the rest of the film, but after talking it over with my brother, we agreed on the following synopsis. The ending of Only Yesterday is the final act of self-actualization Taiko needs to truly become an adult for the first time. She literally and figuratively leaves her childhood self behind on that train by choosing what she wants for herself in the present moment. The final step in becoming not only an adult, but her own person. At the end of the film, Taiko steps out of yesterday for the first time in her entire life. If Only Yesterday has a reverence for the past of its main character and a sensitive maturity about self-actualization, Infinite Fall's 2017 game Night in the Woods is the exact opposite. Set in a New England forest town that is quite literally sinking into its own post-housing market crash grave, the game follows 20-year-old May Borowski, who is overwhelmingly and immediately characterized by an utter lack of respect for anything or anyone. May, upon a lackluster arrival in her hometown Possum Springs, gets picked up by her aunt, the local cop, and taken home to a house in a town that is desperately clinging to the past. Sinkholes open up, taking parts of streets with them while its longtime residents try to resuscitate a dying economy that makes life in Possum Springs more difficult by the week. We discover the next day that May dropped out of college for a reason she won't explain to really anyone, and that her childhood friends have changed significantly since the last time she came home. In their group band practice on her first real night back, they jam out to a song titled Die Anywhere Else. The lyrics, "Anywhere, just not here," hang in the air with the final unresolved chord as the song ends and leaves a thick blanket of desperate cynicism over the rest of the game. May and her friends are desperate to escape what Possum Springs residents are desperate to relive. Except that's not what this game is about, right? That's not what Night in the Woods is about at all. There is something severely wrong happening outside of town, just past the railroad tracks. On her first full night back in town, May and her friends discover a severed arm outside of the diner. On Halloween night, May swears she saw someone get kidnapped and maybe killed before being dragged into the forest by some ghostly figure moving faster than any human should be able to run. May finds herself increasingly exhausted day by day. She spends her nights dreaming of a cosmic entity older than time itself, telling May that there is no point to any of what she or anyone else is doing, and that the universe is nothing but uncaring, unfeeling atoms, shapes, and colors, nothing more. Like growing up, Night in the Woods is about a lot of things. I'd love to discuss them all another time, but right now I want to focus on the things the game has to say about maturity through May and her friends B, Greg, and Angus. May, simply put, cannot act any way except childish. Our protagonist insists to the teenagers in town that she's an adult and they're all kids, but every single adult in town asserts that she too is still just a kid. She doesn't have any particular goals in life or things she wants to accomplish, so she spends every day wandering around town talking to whoever will hold a conversation and committing various adorable misdemeanors along the way in an equally adorable 2D platformer art style. Stuck in the impossibly frustrating transition between childhood and adulthood, almost everyone in Possum Springs, her friends included, wants May to grow up in one way or another. It's not that she just likes breaking the law, it's that she approaches every conversation and interaction like a permanently disgruntled 7th grader. While at first I found it a little frustrating and even irritating, I really love how this game is not afraid to remind you that May is not exactly the best person. I remember several moments in NPC interactions where every one of the dialogue options I had to pick from was the wrong thing to say in that moment. With no choice, I would pick the least, or sometimes most, inflammatory option and painfully watch the interaction degrade, knowing that there was indeed a better way the whole time. Arguments with parents and neighbors over getting a job, May looking for answers to her questions about purpose in life, antagonizing the Navy recruiter, struggling to play base, watching the town crumble around her, ethereal dreams she can't even remotely decipher. There's a lot happening in May's life that she doesn't understand. And over the course of the game, she gets more and more desperate for answers in the hopes that one of these things will be the thing. The thing that finally fixes her life and sets it back on course, giving her purpose but not restricting her to a prescribed life. The dream sequences, the discussions with God, the kidnappings, the town slipping into that post-recession unimportance, all of it needs fixing in May's mind as she hopes to have a catch-all answer for everything. But she doesn't find that answer, and in comparison with all the other characters in Night in the Woods, even the ones younger than her, May looks far from grown up. In fact, May is characterized primarily through her differences with her friends. Night in the Woods offers its players two branching storylines depending on who you choose to hang out with each of the three different nights in Possum Springs, either Bee or Greg. On my first playthrough, seeing how lonely she seemed and how curious I was about her, I chose to hang out with Bee all 3 nights. In those hangouts, I learned that Bee is drowning in the responsibilities of keeping her parents' hardware store open after her mom passed in their senior year of high school. In the time May was away at college, Bee became her dad's caregiver as he sunk further into grief and failing health on top of running the store, and as a result, she feels incredibly lonely and isolated from her peers. Bee really, really wants to feel normal, wants to be a real kid again, yet feels trapped from all sides in a life she wants to break free from. She cannot understand May's indecision when faced with the freedom she desires, cannot understand the cruelty of a world that would bury someone indefinitely in keeping her broken family afloat and alive when she herself is unbelievably only 20 years old with no future. Underneath a disinterested and blunt persona is someone that wants so badly to have or even work for the opportunity May has thrown away so carelessly, and she kind of resents May for it. Bee resents May for staying perpetually 14 and refusing to grow up while she was forced to. In her own words, I stayed here and got older while you went off and stayed the same. Yet at the same time, they stay close. Even after multiple awful fights, May constantly saying the wrong thing and making the wrong decisions, they both still apologize the next morning and choose to stay friends. Despite their differences, Bee and May more or less share in the same struggles of trying to figure out adult life. Bee is proof that May might not necessarily be better off if she were more of an upstanding citizen, and May is proof that Bee can and should want better for herself. Simple proximity isn't what keeps them close, nor is it being the best available friend. It's their shared experience of struggling to figure out exactly how to live. Greg, by contrast, is still the same old troublemaker May knew him as long ago. He seems to be doing just fine, holding down a job, as incredible as that sounds, and trying to make a life for himself and his new boyfriend Angus. On my second playthrough, I chose the Greg route all 3 nights and played through several delightful mini-games where May and Greg relive their adolescence through breaking and entering, knife fights, gunplay, shattered glass, and stolen animatronics. But on that third night, it's revealed that Greg isn't doing as well as he seems to be either. Out of almost nowhere, he quiets down before asking May, "I'm a good person, right?" Greg has a lot more trouble voicing his emotions than Bee, but on this third night he gives it a harder try than the entire rest of the game. Greg wants to create a real adult life with his boyfriend, wants to do everything in his power to support him and create a life together, but is so worried that he'll never amount to anything more than the delinquent he's always been. He so very badly wants to grow up for real so he can continue to be there for Angus and Angus can be there for him, but doesn't believe that he can. If he became this responsible adult with priorities and a family, Greg isn't sure he'd still be Greg. May comforts Greg as best she can, but unlike the third night with Bee, they don't seem to come to any conclusions together. While Greg seems to feel better after talking about it with May, we as the audience can finally understand what's made him seem just a little distant for the whole game. Still, he stands as proof that one can be a mess-up delinquent like May and still have good intentions, still contribute to a relationship despite a penchant for crimes. Angus is not one of the 3 main characters, but the player can choose an optional hangout with him that I took on my second playthrough as well. After May witnesses the ghost murder, kidnapping, whatever it was, she and Bee come up with a few possibilities as to what may have actually happened. The 3 friends, Greg, Bee, and Angus, then all say they'll each help May with one of those possibilities over the next couple of nights. On the night you can spend with Angus, the 2 of you investigate Possum Jump, a cliff in the forest preserve with rumors of supernatural activity. Angus, through his limited interactions in the game, is a big softie. Quiet, sincere, heartfelt, and passionate, he is an adorable side character in a game chock full of memorable NPCs. We learn he suffers from asthma while climbing up to Possum Jump, but he doesn't let it stop him from educating us about the limestone furnaces left over on the trail from the town's mining days. Angus and May stargaze from the top of the cliff for a while, and eventually Angus opens up in a similar way to Greg. He shares that he was abused as a child, both physically and emotionally. Neither of his parents were supportive of him in pretty much any way, and during the many hours he spent locked in a pantry as a child, he developed an interest in science fiction as a way to rationalize and understand the world around him. As an adult, Angus is desperate to build and maintain healthy relationships as a way to compensate for the harm he's experienced, as well as work through his own trauma. My favorite line from this whole game comes from him in this scene, one that I think is the best summary of this main storyline that the game gives us. I believe in a universe that doesn't care and people who do. Angus, though he's a delightfully selfless and good-natured character, is grown up for all the wrong reasons. The relaxed maturity and analytical lens with which he views the world, while they are helpful to his friends, are a result of a very unhappy childhood and a desire for a happier adulthood. The question of who Angus would be if he'd had a more stable childhood is one of the many cans of worms Night in the Woods leaves a player to think about, but in the game we see Angus as yet another example of what May is not. Kind, patient, forgiving, employed, everything that people like May's parents would say is a successful young adult. Night in the Woods examines the humiliation, frustration, and cosmic horror that can accompany a visit to a place where you were once young. Like only yesterday, it doesn't offer any grand conclusions about the process of growing up, but through May, B, Greg, and Angus shows us that there maybe isn't an answer at all. Not only that everyone's experience are different, but that the growing up will involve a lot more failure than success one way or another. The failure of Angus's parents to provide a healthy childhood for him. Greg's perceived failure to be enough for another person in a relationship. B's failure to be a normal kid despite her best efforts at the cost of her future. May's failure to contribute to her loved ones' lives in any way they deem socially acceptable. All of them growing up through humiliating failure. These characters' identities are undergoing rapid changes for many reasons, yet none of them know exactly where they are going. They have all begun impossibly difficult journeys with no idea how they will end. The game's end diverts from these themes towards something else entirely, but ends exactly the way it says it will. Night in the Woods, as it states to the player on the first screen, begins and ends at night in the woods. All of us begin and end at night in the woods, lost in the darkness and thickness of a suddenly unfamiliar world, trying desperately to find our way back home. Of all the solo pop artists to break out in the late 2000s, there's definitely one that stands out among all the rest. Someone who came onto a well-established pop scene and completely changed the game, who rocked the music industry with her once-in-a-generation songwriting skills. Someone who blew up conventions in her genre through subtle, nuanced examinations of femininity, identity as an artist, and agency over one's music, through her monstrously powerful live performances and hits from 2007 that refused to lose popularity. You probably know her. She's one of the titans of popular music today that is certainly showing no signs of slowing down anytime soon. Someone with gigantic bangs that released the hands-down best album of her career on Friday, May 13th, 2022, Florence Welch. All jokes aside, as a massive Florence and the Machine fan myself, I really do think that Florence Welch is literally everything that the world has convinced itself Taylor Swift is. And while that's a topic for another day, and I do indeed plan on talking about her newer music even more than I already have on this channel, Florence and the Machine's debut album Lungs, released in 2007, packs a visceral punch through its examinations on youth. Welch's signature mark of her songwriting through the last 20 years has been the way her songs continually unfold and develop, starting from small, often rather intimate moments with sparse instrumentation that grow into sweeping orchestrations and brick wall backing vocals that seem to pierce the heavens themselves. And on Lungs, not only does she have this effect down perfectly from her debut, but these angelic, or who's to say they aren't demonic, choruses reinforce all of her statements about young womanhood by literally having dozens of extra voices join in and say, "I have felt this too," even if those voices are all her own. Lungs isn't even my second favorite album of hers, nor do I think it's even anywhere close to her best work, but these builds have a grit and fury and explosiveness to them that she hasn't really replicated since, instead opting to write much more closely focused and personal material. The album isn't super pessimistic about youth and maturity either, but it is driven. And as far as driving music goes, it is powerful right from the start. The album opens with what's probably her most popular song to date, Dog Days Are Over, but we're actually going to come back to that one. It's a great song, nowhere near her best, but it's a lot more personal than the rest of the themes I want to talk about. Dog Days is followed by an even more impressive track, Rabbit Heart, subtitle Raise It Up. Like a lot of Florence Welch's music, Rabbit Heart has a lot of things going for it, but I think the song's biggest achievement is a statement about young women, or just people in general, growing up into a restrictive, patriarchal society and finding themselves frustrated with the sudden onslaught of rules and power disparities the world contains. All of this is presented through a metaphor of a sacrificial lamb being given to appease a greater power beyond mortal understanding, or even something so small and frail yet numerous as a rabbit having its heart cut out for the same purpose. And that idea of the power in numbers rabbits have is supported by that massive wall of backing vocals joining Welch on the chorus, singing the lyrics, "This is a gift, it comes with a price, who is the lamb and who is the knife?" These vocals give the effect of dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of extra voices joining in on the song's themes, as if to say we too have been put down in this world as young women that just want to live their own lives. And another side of this argument are the opening lyrics. The looking glass, so shiny and new, how quickly the glamour fades. I mean, come on, that's gotta be about the unrealistic beauty standards put upon young women from a very early age, and this was in 2007 before social media. The line in the chorus about King Midas says to the listener that something that achieves this fantastical level of beauty is nothing but a husk of a human with no real identity or connection to the real world. The music video puts all of this into the context of Alice in Wonderland, which has its own very well documented statements about youth and womanhood and maturity, and then the drums and the backing vocals kick back in on the chorus, and this is only the second song on the album, and it rocks so hard. I'll never stop being impressed by this song, not only how powerful it is right from the start of the album, but also how much energy it gives every other song on it. Rabbit Heart, subtitle Raise It Up, sets the stage beautifully for the rest of the album's themes. The album's fourth track, Howl, continues them by opening with the line, "If you could only see the beast you've made of me, I held it in my chest, but now it seems you've set it running free." To me, Howl is a song about the loss of childish innocence, which could have happened in a number of ways, like Night in the Woods tells us, wrapped in a metaphor of becoming free of a restrictive partner's restraints after a breakup, wrapped in another metaphor of a werewolf-type transformation into something alien from the original person that is beyond their or anyone else's understanding. With all that in mind, let's go back to that opening lyric. "If you could only see the beast you made of me, I held it in, but now it seems you've set it running free." And just like before, those backing vocals kick in on the chorus to remind us that she is not alone in saying this. Kiss with a Fist is the album's fifth track and its lead single. It's also the first song that Florence and the Machine ever released together as a group, and is just kind of one big song about one man's meat is another man's poison. Kiss with a Fist tells us that it's better to do something messy and with a heart full of passion and dedication than to not do it at all, or do it the way someone else wants you to. The song tells us to stick to your guns, stay true to who you are, and in the process of growing up, discover who exactly that is. The song fits right in with so many other songs about teenage rebellion, and the relationship described in Kiss with a Fist, in its pretty limited lyrics, is messy and at times dysfunctional, but hey, it works, and the people described in it seem to be happy. And a good bookend for this argument is the album's ninth track, Cosmic Love, which seems to be about the overwhelming nature of being a young adult confronted with a world of problems, unable to grapple with any of them because you are still just a kid. Cosmic Love could also be interpreted as another allegory for that loss of childlike innocence, but the lyric, "The stars, the moon, they have all been blown out, you left me in the dark," really hammers home that idea about feeling lost in the adult world. There is a massive instrumental rush at the end of the song that is the epitome of that building effect mentioned earlier. This grand sweeping orchestration symbolizes the massive information you're suddenly aware of as a teenager or young adult. And Florence's voice just keeps singing higher and higher and higher on every loop back through the chorus at the end, and this song is monstrously powerful by the time it finishes. The comfort, however, in Cosmic Love is that belief in the things and people you care about is what gets you through this difficult stage of your life. Belief is blind, unfailing, and ever trusting. It's difficult to trust anything or anyone that much, and can certainly lead to betrayal, as other songs on this album explore. You don't necessarily have to understand the world as it crumbles or grows around you. You just have to stick with what you believe in. And while Cosmic Love isn't the last track on the album, it does flip this idea towards the listener at the end of the song by asking them, what do you believe in? Lungs is maybe the most frustrated of these three projects in that it doesn't know what to do with all of this emotion. It's also definitely the least explicit about its opinions to the listener. There is so much commentary on so many things, all more or less relating to maturity and young adulthood, but the album itself doesn't seem to want to take a stance on any of them. After a first listen, it might seem like Lungs is condemning a lot of these things and saying that youth is something that should be cherished and preserved as much as possible. However, the fury and passion that pervade the album, even after several more listens, indicate a kind of perverse love for this tragedy of lost youth. Because, after all, if this youth was never lost or stolen in the first place, this artist wouldn't have been moved enough to tell these stories. The complicated relationship between hardship and the connections between humans it creates is something Welch would continue to explore in her later albums, with a much more refined and personal lens. And this relationship has also been very succinctly broken down by a number of other powerful storytellers. But the relationship between one's lost youth and the world that it takes away, in one form or another, is one that every person knows to some extent. Between two lungs lies a beating heart, with such an unknowable amount of love and hatred and passion that it seems almost foolish to channel into one idea, one purpose, or one person. And Lungs understands that growing up is the catalyst for all of this emotion, deliberately staying away from lingering on any one theme for too long. Instead, the monstrously impressive songwriting, performances, and production all aim to resonate deeply within the listener's soul in a way they can't quite put into words. Florence and the Machine's Titanic debut album displays the overwhelmingly powerful emotions a person feels as they grow up, and how they can completely consume one's identity, purpose, and worldview. And in the album's opening track, and to this day Welch's most popular song, Dog Days Are Over, she says, "I never wanted anything from you, except everything you had, and what was left over, too." All three of the stories in this video were relatively short-lived endeavors. Takahata was involved with many fan-favorite Studio Ghibli films, including Kiki's Delivery Service and Pom Poko, but only directed the few mature films in their catalog like Grave of the Fireflies and The Tale of the Princess Kaguya. His impressionist influence certainly lives on powerfully in Hayao Miyazaki's work with Studio Ghibli, but between Kaguya and Only Yesterday, it's interesting to wonder what other stories about maturity he could have told had the circumstances been different. Night in the Woods was one of only 2 games that Infinite Fall made as a game studio. Its co-founder Alex Holoka died at age 35 just 2 years after the game released. Florence Welch has had a long, prolific career that has been the epitome of quality over quantity, but like I said before, nothing Florence and the Machine has released after Lungs had quite the same power and energy. Welch's music since Lungs has been more focused on her own personal struggles with addiction and poor mental health, many of them in part brought on by the process of creating Lungs. Just like growing up itself, the situations that allowed these stories to be told only existed for a short amount of time. Their creators changed, as we all do, and the world changed around them, and while they are all definitely rooted in their individual eras, they all have a timelessness to them. Taiko's story could be applied to a wide range of issues, from generational trauma to the ceaseless grind of capitalism. Night in the Woods so succinctly captures the specific feeling of being alone late at night in the kitchen of your childhood home, as well as 100 other emotions. Lungs still to this day makes millions of young people feel seen and heard, even if they can't voice how or why. And all of these stories tell each other's themes. They all deal with acceptance of the past, all address that growing up involves more failure than success, and all understand that the process of growing up is far too complicated to ever fully explain. And all of it happens far too fast and is gone far too quickly. In his Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, John Koenig creates words and definitions to emotions all people experience but have no language for. His made-up word tyrus is defined as the bittersweet awareness that all things must end. He expands on this definition with the following passage excerpted from the book. The meaning of things isn't an emergent property of how long they last. We are the ones who define them for ourselves, if only for our own satisfaction. It is an honor reserved for mortals. We just have to have the courage to do it. To decide for ourselves which fleeting, precious, interminable moments will carry with us right to the end. Maybe to the mountains they won't amount to all that much, but to the honeybees it's more than enough. To the honeybees, summer never ends. They live for a few months at most, barely long enough to feel the seasons change. They have no need to remind each other to put themselves out there, gathering their rosebuds while they may. You can hear them buzzing deep in their hives, trading bits of sweetness they've gathered out in the world. How easily they pass the nectar back and forth between their bodies, freely mixing it all together as if none of it made a difference, knowing they'll never live long enough to taste it all. And yet their honey is the one thing that never expires, that never loses its sweetness. Maybe that buzzing sound is just another way of saying, we are here. Hey everyone, if you have made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I am someone that has a lot to say about the things that they care about, and it continually blows my mind that there are people that want to listen to me rant about all my favorite things and listen to my opinions. So thank you so much for watching. This was definitely the most ambitious thing I've ever created, though it didn't start that way. I watched Only Yesterday with my brother for the first time in January of this year, and we were talking about it so much together that I ended up writing down a full analysis of just the end of the movie that then eventually turned into a whole essay analyzing the whole movie, just so I could have some thoughts to share with him. Around the same time, I was playing a lot of Night in the Woods, and I thought that those two would make a really cool contrast between each other, so I started writing the Night in the Woods analysis. And then about a month later, I listened to Lungs for the first time in a long time, and I saw the thread connecting all three of them. And yeah, I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's far from perfect, but I'm really, really proud of this. And this has been a labor of love for the past 3 months that has been a real blast to work on. I am already writing and planning for a much larger than this project about a topic which, if you know me, you could probably guess what I'd be willing to talk about for hours on end. So start looking forward to that in the near future. Not near future, probably sometime late this summer is when I'll be done with that. And I've got a lot of other smaller projects planned in the meantime of varying degrees of seriousness. So I promise it won't be another 3 months before I put something on this channel again. But again, thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw, stay subscribed so you don't miss the next one. But it really means the world that there are people that I can share these ideas and thoughts with, and share some incredible stories with. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.